Welcome. We are in the second chapter of our thought experiment, which we have called the sovereign way. In today's group session, we are going to define sovereignty and distinguish between ascension and sovereign consciousness, and the role that this distinction plays in modern spiritual leadership. But before I get to that, I'm grateful to present my story, or at least a little bit of my sovereign way, the path that God raised me to freedom. So let me preface by saying that I believe we are in a time of rediscovering what it is to truly be sovereign at the human core, to be free, to be equipped, and to be peaceful in our relationships with ourselves, each other, and our precious planet, and our wonderful cultures and ways of life. And I say that there is a whole generation of us who resonate with the word sovereign and who have chosen to be good and do good and nurture a free life for ourselves and for our communities, centered on truth and centered on love. And I say that we are connected and that there is a coordination between us, and that is what I shall be calling the Great Commission. We are each raised by God independent of whatever religious or cultural structures or lack of structure that we were born into. That organic path is what I shall call the sovereign way. It's that unique and independent path that you are walking with God, to ascend in mind and vibration, while also helping to make more love in the world. So today I'm going to be talking a whole lot about Jesus. And although my message is not about Jesus really, though it is impossible not to talk about him on a study of consciousness and energetics. And there's absolutely no avoiding his influence if you are to truly walk the sovereign way. And this process has taken me 10 years, and my relationship with him has transformed. And I want to share some of that with you because it's going to help me structure the main distinction that we're going to get to in today's thought experiment. Here we go. This is who I was when I met Jesus. It was 2013, and this is when I first started talking to him in my mind. And I actually rather disdained him, to be honest with you. I thought him a cartoon character from my middle school religious classes. Some sort of Jesus guy with magical party tricks who died because of my abominable sin that his angry dad, the bearded boss in the clouds, had set me up to eat at the beginning of time. And I couldn't reconcile any of that. It didn't make any sense to me, and it wasn't the God that I knew. I certainly didn't need saving. I didn't feel impotent or helpless or sinful or unworthy. I was and am an entitled millennial grown up in the Western world, and I felt more like a scorned God, full of divine rage about all the injustices in the world. I was healthy, I was conscious, I was empowered. I had a minor vendetta to execute against structured religion, so I really had no need for Jesus whatsoever. But then he just kept showing up. He already knew, it seemed, that I loved the idea of a universal Christ consciousness. And I was also warming up to the character Yeshua ben Joseph, and I couldn't stop thinking about him. He was this rebellious Hebrew man who defied the mainstream, sharing the mysteries of the universe, ascending dimensionally to join a pantheon of other evolutionary beings embodying God within themselves, serving the ascension of humanity by guiding us all into a purer state of oneness. Wow, what a guy. My intellect and my spiritual ego could easily relate to that dude, because I hungered for those consciousness upgrades. I was seeking out and experiencing these bombastic thresholds, these mind-blowing plot twists and visitations and revelations. And I thought of ascension as a dimensional rise through layers of consciousness into a single universal point of Christ field energy, if you like. And I believed that mastery was the path to enlightenment. Mastery of mind, mastery of vibration, mastery of life behaviors, mastery of creation, to manifest my own life, to create all my dreams. I believed that was the pinnacle of the spiritual life. Because after all, if mind is over matter, then I should be able to control the storm. And since Yeshua was someone who already had, I accepted his job application and I hired him as an ascended master to be my favorite spirit guide. And you know what? Jesus didn't actually mind me knowing him like that. After all, he said, it was a little bit true, and all relationships mature. So just come and see, he said. And as my conversations and relations with him went on, I had unending questions about God, about religion, about spiritual lineage. But Jesus always steered me away from theological conformity. And my path with him felt more like a private tutelage through many remarkable teachers, bringing me along a path of sidesteps into various forms of ministry. And along that path, with gentleness and with compassionate humor, he pointed out flashes of brilliance wherever we went. For example, in the early days, when I was training with metaphysical spiritualists in Florida, he introduced me to the everlasting wellspring called the Holy Spirit, the creative continuation of life and life abundantly. And he showed me how to use this wellspring for the masteries of healing and manifesting. And then he pointed out our spiritual addiction to the marvels and spectacles of the beyond. And he showed me how we vainly abuse supernatural abilities to dazzle our audiences and revel in the performance of ascending enlightenment. But glamour is empty and gets boring after a while. We're in an age of glamour and vanity. Hyperreal fake realities are created and circulated in a nanosecond. We're becoming more and more addicted to spectacular. We chase bliss and ecstasy, transcendence, higher and higher vibrations. We yearn for other planets and dimensions. We're losing touch with the mundane. To be sovereign, we must remember that the true spiritual life is real life, not just in the high heavens, in the thrones, but also in the smelly little mangers. If we are so pure that we cannot tolerate low vibes, then what good are we to the Great Commission? When I was apprenticing with New Thought masters and science of mind philosophers, Jesus pointed out the power and authority that our sovereign reason has when we dwell in a conscious, loving mind. He showed me that we can shift entire timelines when we claim sovereignty over our vibrational environment and use precise wording in our day-to-day language. I discovered that with linguistic mastery, we can easily cause a psychoneurosomatic shift in our entire manifest experience, and literally everything changes. And then he showed me the crushing weight of responsibility that we put on ourselves for creating and maintaining such a pure mind and aligned biofield that we can be, do, and have anything we want. I saw that we get so stuck on positive language and affirmations that we forget how to express authentically. And instead we create these complex spells of false light that we think will fix our lives. We forget that the true power is not in the words we use, but in the love of the one speaking. And this lesson was compounded around the same time when I brought my local Lutheran priest a homemade chicken curry. We had a picnic in his office, and I challenged him to explain to me why his congregants couldn't name the tenets of their specific denomination, or indeed had any idea why they weren't Catholic or Baptist or Jewish or Buddhist, because I had investigated, you see, and I found that they didn't know why they were Lutheran. So, bearing a flag for powerful women demonized by priests throughout history, I took it upon myself to demand to Pastor Steve that religious leaders stand accountable for the separation caused by sectarianism. Elizabeth, he responded, helping himself to some cilantro rice and not flinching at all under my fiery gaze. He said, I don't care if my people know the principles of Lutheranism or not. I just want this to be a place where people can come to love and be loved. And I was floored. I realized for the first time at age 33 that love, not knowledge, was the whole point of it, right here and now. I had been so hung up on the search for knowledge. And then Pastor Steve ate a forkful of curry and said, and I could feel God smiling. So I released my vendetta against religion, and a year later, my husband and I were making healing chocolates in a little cottage kitchen in Colorado. We were blending raw cacao and essential oils and Reiki into these lovely drops of chocolate medicine. And Jesus showed me how intimate God is when you can feel him in the visceral sensation of universal life force that infuses into and throughout the ingredients of your life. And my Reiki master, Jeff, and I would smell essential oils, and we would talk about how the very Holy Spirit moves through energy fields in an alchemy that calibrates and sanctifies all things according to a sovereign intention higher than mine. And I discovered how hung up we get on healing, obsessing over fixing stuff to prove our growth, seeking out adversity just to experience the thrill of overcoming it, because we've lost touch with the mundane. I saw how often we turn our favorite healing modalities into these little golden calves, and we get hypnotized by results into placing protocols and methods above love. I saw firsthand how miracle healings can be authorized by individual people on a human level with powerful, precise command and right sequencing. And I saw how difficult it is to sacrifice our own spiritual growth and high vibration and personal preferences and put all that aside for the sake of a more challenging group environment. And he showed me how extremely delicate the balance is between anointed vibrational mastery and ego-driven control. Because believing that we have the authority to create anything we want, I experienced, both as a perpetrator and as a victim, how forced mental architecting and energetic manipulation creates fickle webs of false realities, energy fields of fake healing that just can't sustain themselves and take an enormous amount of personal control to keep alive. Even with the noblest intentions an ego can muster. I am doing this for women everywhere. Unless these are plugged into the true vine of natural organic expansion, these mirages of oases quickly fall away, leaving devastation and disillusionment as we spin in circles under false diagnoses of lack consciousness or limiting beliefs. True healing comes from the wellspring of life, not from ideas and visualizations. During this time, I was training for Episcopal priesthood, and my role in the ministry was serving laying on of hands healing in an alcove after the service in a small mountain church, a beautiful wooden church called St. Lawrence. And my pastor, Nancy, she was a converted Jew who beamed like the sun when she greeted her community. She would light up when you walked in, like you're the most precious thing she had ever seen. And she was like Mother Mary. She fed us from the church gardens when we were hungry. She gave us a car to drive between the little church and the derelict barn that we were living in, our chocolate business having failed. And she sat with me for hours chatting about mystic women and our ways. And then when my husband and my daughters and I were at absolute rock bottom after a hurricane and the business failure, it was the humble generosity in this Episcopal community that saved our lives. It wasn't our badass mastery. It was the friendship and the self-sacrificial love of the community. And it was becoming so hard for me to ignore how pridefully selfish my performance-driven pursuit of enlightenment had been, when most of the time we're actually just good little people trying to live as one family in a turbulent and conflicted world. But there is no I am without we are. And it sort of went like that over the years, my journey, my story, across this bizarre terrain of homelessness and magic and off-grid adventures, natural disasters, financial disasters, miracle upon miracle, always facilitated through other people willing to sacrifice something for others. The day after Hurricane Helene flooded my house, 19 people from all walks of life showed up with shovels and buckets and bleach, and in 8 hours the water was out of the house. I didn't create that, but it happened for me. Jesus was in the day-to-day conversations with ordinary people, in the glint of someone's eye, the moment a punchline is dropped, or in the transient murmur of wisdom on the tongue of a passerby. He would show up to play board games with me and my husband. He would point out tiny purple purslane blossoms growing underfoot, and he'd point out the magic numbers in clocks and license plates. And he would sit and minister with me when I was rubbing frankincense salves on my homeless friend's sores. And he always laughed at my jokes. So during my time developing the Sovereign Way, when I spent so much time in my mind choosing words and teachings to write down in this book, his focus was never on which people or whose ideologies were wrong or sinful or misguided. It wasn't like that. It always felt like he understood our human endeavors to organize life. And he knew that our stories would always somewhat miss the mark. And he has tremendous compassion for that. He never pointed out the flaws in people around me, but he often pointed out the flaws in systems, including systems of being, systems of decision-making, systems of movement. And in the many times that I descended into judgment or criticism for another person's way, he reminded me that we recognize each other by our love, not by our doctrinal affiliations. He always wanted to emphasize God with us. So when I stopped looking for God in the alignment of consciousness principles, and I started seeing him in love, I saw him everywhere. I saw him in every system I had the honor of moving through. And all the energy that I had been spending on my own healing and development, that was all released, and I became peaceful and devoted. So now my mind then was free from having to create my life, and I became available to a much greater plan. So the distinction that I would like to offer today is between the ascension consciousness, the performance-driven quest for enlightenment that in my book, The Sovereign Way, I've called Excelsior, and a sovereign consciousness, a free mind that is with God, no matter where you are on your progressive way, no matter what is manifesting around you. A way of life, a way of knowing life that is free and equipped and mobilized to be with others in a symphonic journey home, now in this pivotal point and over the eons of time. So let's go to our group study to discuss this distinction and what it means to our leadership in this modern age. Thank you for watching.